My name is Matt Barber. I'm a principal program manager on the CRM, the customer engagement, Dynamics 365 for customer engagement. You can tell I do this a lot. CRM platform team. So that's the team that actually owns the engine. All the cool apps that you see coming out of the customer engagement space are based on. So things like the sales app, the service app, the field service application, the project service applications, all built on the infrastructure that we provide. Now, before I get too deep into this, just let me kind of, Ignite's always a fun conference because it's who's in the room. So by show of hands, who here has a CRM on-premise or online environment? I use the term CRM. There's no marketing people in the room, I hope. Okay. Yep. Okay. Now, how many, by show of hands, are on-prem? Couple of people. Yeah, very emphatic hand up there. Yes. Okay. And by show of hands, who is a ISV? Somebody who classifies themselves as an ISV, identifies as an ISV. Okay. And who is a SI, an implementer, a developer? All right. So I'm going to guess the rest of you are like, what is this Dynamics 365 thing and what is customer engagement? And I'm going to start now, look around the room and go, this is a deep conversation. We're going to be talking about platform core componentry. I'll be doing some very, very light overview, but this is not going to be a, hey, what is customer engagement? Okay. This is a platform update. Now, this is something that we do typically at the ISV conferences, at the community groups, the developer-focused conferences. We're bringing it here to Ignite this cycle around because there is a lot of stuff going on inside of the 9X platform. Now, I use the term 9X. There have been, to date, 9 versions of the Dynamics 365 customer engagement platform. We are in the process of shipping the 9th iteration of this. The 9th iteration is a substantial change from the past, on the order of when we went from CRM 4 to CRM 5, kind of architectural shift on the guts. Okay? So I had to pick what to talk about. So I picked just a few topics to cover that have substantial changes. This is by no means the exhaustive list. There is a tremendous number of changes that have occurred in our platform. In the user experience side of it, I've left that off. I will touch a little bit on some of the things that we've enabled from the platform from the point of view of the user experience, but the user experience side will be covered in much more depth tomorrow in a session given by Orrin and Linda. If you look up Linda, I think she's the only one here, you will find her session is tomorrow morning. It is called the Unified Interface. Okay? So those of you that do a lot of form dev, we are changing the form system again. Again, yes, I know, you've been with us a couple of times. It's a good change. It's something that we've needed to do for quite a while. So we're going to start with the core platform. As I often say, the core platform is the foundation. It's the engine. If you see us, something went wrong. That's typically when I get called in is when something's busted. If it isn't busted, it's sales doing a great job, it's field service doing a great job, those teams look fantastic. And that's my job. So we're going to start with solutions. Now, I always start these things off with the solution system when I'm talking about the core platform because that is the place that you touch our platform. That is the place that you use for extensibility and adding, changing, modifying feature sets within our platform. So from a concepts point of view, and I always have to touch this because every conference I run into, there seems to consistently be confusion about this, even though we've been saying the same thing for years and years and years. I'm going to restate it again. There are 2 kinds of solutions inside CRM today, or the customer engagement platform today. They are the unmanaged solution and the managed solution. The unmanaged solution is for development. This is where you build. Okay? This is not what you ship to production. And this is going to become even more critical as we move forward. I've been saying this for a while. I've been saying there's a real good reason that we shouldn't be doing this. You're going to see that reason materialize today. Managed solutions are for the things that you're going to move forward. So I've now created a customization, an extension, a capability. I've packaged that up, and I now want to proceed that into my test environment and then into my production environment. That's what managed solutions are for. Fundamentally, managed solutions are diffs on the main system. They layer. Whereas an unmanaged system is sort of, if you're a Star Trek fan, it's Captain Picard sitting up there saying, make it so. Okay? Unmanaged solutions cannot be uninstalled. You can disassemble them, or try, but you cannot uninstall them. Okay? They merge with the system. The managed solution can be uninstalled, and if you do happen to run into one of the very few bugs left where you get locked, concreted, open up a support ticket, we'll get it uninstalled for you. Okay? And we will get that bug fixed. This is something we've been aggressively pursuing, those of you that have been with us for a while. So let's talk about what the difference is. In the case of an unmanaged solution is something that's based on the core platform solution. So what I have up here is the customer engagement system solution. We used to call it the CRM-based solution. It is the core, what we ship in the product. Now, above that, there's a set of layers that manage customization. One of those layers is the unmanaged layer. The unmanaged layer is at the top. So if I want to say customize the account, I would select the account because we ship the account, and I'd want to affect a customization to the account. So the actual pristine copy of the account lives in the base solution. When I make my changes, I'm adding a reference to that account that attaches my changes in the unmanaged layer to a solution, in this case, an unmanaged solution. The important thing to understand is that if I go and create a second unmanaged solution and include that account, and I include it in its totality, I'll pick up the customizations that were made by the first guy. Okay? Big landmine, something lots of people stumble on. We're going to try to make that a bit more apparent as we move forward, but this is one of the critical things that trip people up, understanding the relationship between various unmanaged solutions when referring to the same component. The way to think about it is that the solution, the unmanaged solution, is a container of references. It refers to a component. Okay? It doesn't actually contain it. Now, managed solutions, on the other hand, actually contain things. The way the managed solution system works is that again, starting with the base system, the base system that we ship, there's a layer called the managed layer that sits on top of that. Now, on top of that, we can deploy a managed solution or more managed solutions. Managed solutions layer on top of one another and interact with the layer below it. So you can think of it, I'm laying one sheet of graph paper down with a picture, I'm laying another sheet of graph paper down with another picture, I'm laying another sheet down, and I can see all the way through that. Hold that up to a light, you have a picture. That is what the top of the unmanaged stack looks like. The managed stack looks like. That's then what is seen by the unmanaged layer, which then can have customizations that are locked into that environment. And that, in turn, is what the user sees up from the bottom. Think about it, a light shining at the bottom of the platform. You look down into it, that's the picture of the entity. That's the picture of a form. That's the picture of the customization. Okay? Now, what does it mean? It means that layering, the order of import, is exceptionally important. Very, very important that you understand the order in which things go in, because the order that you put something in can change the way the surface looks. Okay? All right, so now that I've covered the basics, let's talk about the solution lifecycle. Solution lifecycle is made up of three major components. The creator, this is where you're doing your authoring experience. This is where you're building, whatever it is you're building. Once you've built it and you want to ship something, then you have to create a patch, or you don't have to. You can jump straight to upgrade, but typically we advise you to create a patch. A patch is a very, very lightweight component that installs very rapidly and modifies something that you shipped. When you've rolled up a set of patches together and now decide that you're ready to move to the next version, you go and you execute an upgrade. An upgrade is a destructive operation. It allows you to remove things as part of the upgrade process. So let's talk about what a patch looks like. So when we create a patch, we start from whatever our pristine was. In this case, it is solution A. It's an unmanaged solution. It has three objects in it. It has a reference to the account, the custom object, and a plugin. And we've decided we're going to create a patch on that. So we use a function of the system called clone solution to patch. When you clone a solution to a patch, it creates a new solution in your environment that is referred to the parent. It does this behind the scenes. You don't have to do anything. You just have to point at the base solution and say clone to patch from there, and we create a patch solution for you. Now, the things that go into this become deltas on the base solution. So in this case, we've now come in and we've added or modified the custom one entity, and we're creating now a patch from that solution. Now that creates what's called a managed patch. Now there's been a couple of questions. Let me pause right here. There's been a bunch of questions I've got is, does this work for unmanaged solutions? Okay, the answer to that question is no. Can you do it? Yes. You can actually go in and get it to try to work, but go back to what I said, because unmanaged solution stamps the system and overwrites whatever's there. Okay? It is not intended to work for the unmanaged system, and in the future we will actually block it from working in the unmanaged solution. Okay? We haven't yet because we didn't think anybody would actually try that. Whoops. So you export it as a managed patch. That managed patch then deploys upon the target environment, creating a variant or a delta on that target environment. So managed patches layer together. So for example, let's take a look at what that looks like in practicality. So we start again with our system solution, and from our system solution, we have our layered concept where we have our managed solution, in this case, solution A. We have another solution there, solution B, and we have a third, solution C. So this constitutes the current image of our system as it stands today. On top of that, we have our unmanaged customizations. We have the view of what the customer sees. Okay? Same pattern we just described with the standard deployment mechanic. And again, the order matters. Now I want to apply a patch. So I've gone through and I've created a patch, in this case for solution A. Now notice that solution A is the first thing in the list. The way that the system typically would operate is if you were to create an entirely new solution, it's going to stick it at the top of that list. Going back to what I said, shine the light underneath of it, look at it, the picture has changed. Patches behave differently. Patches actually find their parent and inject themselves over their parent. Okay? The design intent is to allow you to make a change to your component that you shipped, boxed into your world, that plays nice with the rest of the stack. Okay? Now, it does that repeatedly. If you patch another version of that solution in, it then begins ordering the patches based on the version number that you have. So if you have deployed patch 1 and then patch 2, it will order the patches by stack rank as well. Okay? Very, very important to understand. Now let me give you a more graphic illustration of that. On the left is the, on your left is the install order. Now the install order is what the system would do if you were just doing a flat-up solution install. So in this case, we're tracking the account number, the length of the account number field. Now as we walk up that, system shipped with 20, somebody made a change to extend it to 30, then in B, somebody made a change to extend it to 50. Then you decided to make a patch to layer A, or to solution A, that changes it to 35 because, well, you know, you didn't mean to make it 30, it needed to be slightly bigger, but the customer added another managed solution from somebody else that extended it. And since the customer patched your solution in on top using install, not a patch, the system said, oh, you mean it should be 35. So the view to the customer is that it's 35. Okay? And now you have an escalation, a ticket, a report that you have to go figure out what happened. Okay? When you're using patches, it finds its parent. So in this case, base is 20, solution A is 30, patch gets layered in right on top of that, and then the B solution, the next guy in the install order, picks up where it's supposed to be properly 50, and the customer sees 50. They don't see a change because you patched something in your system, in your shipped component. Make sense? Okay, so let's talk about going to the next version. Now, when we go to the next version, we want to start from our patch list. The way we've designed this, this infrastructure is this allows us to create a series of patches against a base solution and then perform an upgrade on a target that uninstalls the deployed patches and layers the system up. So for example, in the case where we've created 3 different patches, the new cloned version is the composed view of all 3 of those patches, which you then go through and make whatever changes that you'd like to make. If you want to remove something, modify something, you can do that. When the system deploys that, it will affect an upgrade on the system. So by show of hands, who uses the web UI to do solution import? A couple of folks? Okay, on the web UI, you will see a switch that says stage for upgrade. Anybody seen that switch? It's checked automatically. It gives you another button that you have to click on the end that says complete. Okay? The reason that's there is that the way that the upgrade system works, in this scenario where we're trying to remove custom entity 2 and add a new custom entity, is that we start with our deployed solution, in this case solution A, which is a managed solution with 2 custom entities, custom 1 and custom 2. We create a upgrade, version 2, to that solution. And that upgrade is only containing custom 1 and custom 3. Notice it is not containing custom 2. The developer decided to drop that entity. Ideally, there's some sort of data transformation logic that's been included in the package, but fundamentally, the developer decided to drop the entity. So when that gets deployed through the upgrade process, stage for upgrade, your system will now see solution A under bar 1, which is a holding solution. So in the current solution system, you'll actually see it appear as the name of your solution under bar upgrade, okay, during that period of time. Now, at that moment, the old version and the new version are both present on your system. Okay? You now get a code step. If you're using the package deployment system, you get a code step. That code step allows you to do whatever upgrade mechanic that you need to do. If you're using the web UI, there's a pause. This is now where you have to choose to click the next button that says complete the upgrade. Okay? The reason that's there is to allow you through the web UI to execute whatever scripts, data changes, whatever you need to do to get the shape of your solution, the shape of your application from this to that. Okay? Now, why can't we give you like the my stuff doesn't do anything straight up front? Just go straight through and do the process end to end. We did actually do it that way. We floated that with a couple of customers from a general concept point of view, and we had customers going straight through and doing upgrade, dropping entities, and losing data. Okay, so that's not good. If you're going to lose something, we want you to actually push the button that says, yes, I acknowledge that I'm losing something. That's not Microsoft's fault. Okay? All right, so now once you complete that upgrade, what the system does internal to itself is it resets, it uninstalls any patches and components of the first version of that solution, and then restamps the solution 2 without the patch ID. So it has effectively replaced your solution in the system. The net result of that, anything that is not claimed by solution version 2 is dropped from the system. So the net result in this case is that we're left with custom 1 and custom 3. Make sense? All right, important topics. Now, let me explain why they're important. In CRM v9, or in Customer Engagement version 9, there has been a substantial shift in the solutioning infrastructure. There's been a substantial shift in the way in which we deploy the product and manage the product. We've been setting this up for many, many years. Since version 6 is really where we started this road. The net state, the desire that we wanted to get to is the ability to allow us to deploy only the components of the system that are required to serve a particular workload's job. Okay? Not have the system have to have everything. So it consumes disk, it deals with a bunch of other stuff. There's a bunch of quote-unquote debris that you don't want. Like I'm building something that's Salesforce focused or SFA, Salesforce automation focused. I don't want the customer service module. Okay? We want to be able to do that. We've done it with licensing. Now with the Dynamics 365 licensing SKUs, you can purchase a sales seat. You can purchase a customer service seat. You can purchase a field service seat. But today you still get the whole platform. We set this up as part of version 6, 7, and 8 and put the, if you will, the icing in on 8 when we gave you the segmentation system for the solutioning system. The ability to now include in solutions only the things, the components, and the subcomponents that you want. Why? In version 9, we've changed the concept of system. System up to version 9, so version 5 through version 8, there's been a box. They're internal to the box. There has been the base system, the base engine, the platform engine, the core components, the common components, and 3 modules. You wouldn't see those. You would see them if you were watching the installer. And while we did treat them as solutions internally, they were a very special kind of solution that no one else could use. In version 9, that's changed a bit. We're now actually shipping out of the box this thing called the XRM server, and then installing all of the components on top of it to give you what we're calling CRM Prime. Okay? Now, why is this important? Your dependency tree now is no longer against system. It's against the path from the CRM Prime, the CE Prime feature set, to base. Okay? Now, in version 9, we are shipping. You can't actually see the XRM server as its own thing. You will always get CRM Prime. Okay, why? Well, we need to continue our promise to allow you to upgrade. And if we were to take your 8X instance and suddenly rip out the whole sales module or suddenly rip out the whole service module, your solution and your upgrade probably wouldn't go so well. Okay? We have focused on application compatibility for the initial release of 9X. Okay? So, and let me just step back and go, what does that mean? It means that in the background, we have been upgrading half to 90% of the CRM online population to V9 in repeated test runs, okay, and fixing problems in the system. We want to make that upgrade experience as smooth as possible. It's something that we do every time. We don't want the problem on upgrade to be a technical problem. We want it to be, your training, your scheduling. That's where we want the problem to be. We don't want it to be a barrier as far as the technology stops you from doing it. Now, it's important to understand it from a solution development point of view because the way in which you address things now has to be rethought. So, taking an example of working with the account, same example I was starting with a moment ago. In the old way to do it, and in the way that a lot of people still do it, what you do is you go and you select the account, and you're like, I don't want to have to think about this. I just want everything. Give me everything. Okay? So you go in, you click All Assets. Awesome. In the V8 deployments, that would give you a dependency tree that looked like this. Now, some of you guys know what the solutioning guts look like when you actually open the zip file. Some don't. Let me explain it to you real quick. The node root components essentially tells the target, what are the dependencies of this package, this solution that's coming in. So in this case, we have 2 root components, a type 1 and a type 60. Type 1 is an entity, a type 60 is a dashboard or a form. And it says that I need the record wall from Activity Feed Core, and actually I need 2 things from the Activity Feeds Core system. Okay? That's what it says. That's the only dependency that would have in V8. That same operation in V9 generates a dependency node list that looks like this. Okay? So now I have suddenly a dependency on the lead management system, the sales module, the service module, and a few other components, simply because I chose include all. Okay? Which means that the solution that you generate going forward now carries forward all of these dependency components. Okay? Now, let's talk about adding it with just the assets I care about. So in this case, same process. Now I go through and I'm very selective. I choose that I want the main form from account, maybe I want a dashboard, and I want some fields. That's it. I go through, I generate that, and then again in the 8X environment, I get a solution that looks like this. 2 dashboards, 1 entity. That's all. No other dependencies because everything is shipped out of the box. In V9, I now have a list that looks like this. There's my dashboards, there's my 2 dashboards, there's my 1 entity, and I see that I have 2 application dependencies. I have a dependency on the service module, and I have a dependency on the app common module. The app common module is the common entity layer that is at the bottom of the system. The reason I have the dependency on the service module is that I included a dashboard. And that dashboard had a reference, a one-to-N reference out to the customer service module, to an asset in the customer service space. Okay? So very, very important to be conscious of what your dependencies are going forward. Now again, we're going to try to make this more in your face over the next couple of releases. We do have a little nifty screen there, the dependency view, but it really only goes one level deep. So it gives you essentially the surface of this. We are looking at ways to make that more, hey, you're about to export a solution that has these module dependencies. And that's something that you'll see us do in the next release or two. Okay? All right, plugin system changes. This impacts anybody that writes custom code in the plugin system. So who does that? Oh, awesome. Lots of developers in the room. Some pretty big changes in this. And let me say that differently. We are now going to enforce the rules we've been talking about for years. Let me say that differently. We are now enforcing the rules that we've been talking about for years. In the plugin system, you used to be able to, and I say it that way, you used to be able to go in and add, let me step back and define a couple of terms before I dive into that. So in the plugin system, there are three parts to a plugin. There is the assembly. The assembly has all the bits. There is the interface, what we call the plugins, which is the type interfaces. Okay, these are the hooks, the places where I can hook. And then there are the step registrations, the SDK message hooks. This is where you connect the function that does something to the fact that somebody created an account. Okay? Those are the three parts of a plugin. In the past, we've let you pretty much do whatever you want with anything. You can go in, you can add interfaces or add types or plugins. You can remove steps. You could just rev things left and right. Created havoc for us. When we, going back to the uninstall problems that I was talking about, creates a lot of havoc there in the fact that suddenly you're doing an uninstall, the SDK messages are actually referring to steps that no longer exist in the assembly. What do? You're now into a concreted state. You can't uninstall. You can't move forward because something is missed. We'd actually documented all of these rules as to how the policy was supposed to work with the versioning, and now we're actually putting those rules into place. So, as of version 9, and this will be backported to 8, to the 8X series. And in fact, parts of it already are in the 8X ship train, so it'll show up in an update. Major and minor version changes will now allow you to add or remove plugin types. Okay? However, builder revisions will only let you add types. They won't let you remove them. If you try to remove something in a builder revision, and this is the assembly version, it will throw at you. It will not let the solution install. And it will give you a message to the effect of the types in this plugin do not match the target. Okay? Now, why is that? A little bit of insider information about how we actually do this. Inside the plugin system, when you import a new plugin as part of a solution, we apply layering to the plugin concept as well. So this is how we support, in the case of workflow or in the case of the other things where you can have an in-flight workflow system going, you can patch it in and we let that stuff complete out. Okay, we let that old queue drain off and then everything switches to the new. So all new work goes to the new channel, old work that's currently running goes to the old channel, and then we drain it out. Plugins work the same way. It's all the same infrastructure. So anything that's in flight at the moment that the solution system is updated drains out, okay, using the old version. We do that with layering. The layering system is triggered based on the major or minor version of the assembly, not the fact that you did an install. Okay? So we've now had to come back and actually enforce those rules. Now, I expect that there's going to be some griping and some pain. We'll look around the room and go, it's going to make you actually rev the versions on things. It is something that we will come back and try to help from a tooling point of view and a release point of view to make it easier, but it is something that we do need to enforce. Okay? And if anybody is out there that can give me a way to figure this out without opening your code and running your code before figuring it out, I'm really interested to hear from you, because I'm not allowed to open your code or look at your code during solution import. Okay? But this is what we have to do right now. So, wrapping up, key points in the solutioning system, key points. First, version 10. I am not announcing a version 10. I am simply stating that when version 10 appears, it will not accept version 5 or version 6 to version 8 solutions. It will only accept version 9 solutions. Okay? We did this once before. We did this when we went from 5 to 6. And in version 7, we didn't accept version 5 solutions anymore. We are doing the exact same thing again. When we go from version 9 to version 10, we will accept version 9 solutions, and we will accept version 10 solutions. But we will not accept 8 or older. Okay? Why? We just looked at how the dependency system changed. That's why. Okay? Now, next obvious and logical question is, what about upgrade? What about if I upgrade my deployment? Is that going to impact me? The answer is no. We will handle that for you. So a solution that's deployed, as you move up, we'll handle it for you. If you want to be lazy about your solutions, and that's fine, perfectly fine, you can deploy your unmanaged solution into an 8x environment, upgrade your 8x environment to a 9x environment, export your unmanaged solutions, and hey, we're going to clean that dependency stuff up for you. So you'll get an output that now is a 9x spec solution. A couple other things in the solution system. I didn't put it up here, but I want to call it out. Anybody in here handcraft solutions? Go ahead, admit it. I got 2. There's a couple of people low over there. Yeah, okay. Yes, it's not supported. And I'm going to tell you what you need to know because it's going to break on you. We've changed the schema around plugin management inside the solution file for version 9. So there's a bunch of new attributes that are stored with plugins. There's a good reason for that. I'll touch on that when we get into the build with. But the plugin model has changed. Solution packager, which a lot of you guys use in ALM. The version 8 stuff, 8 solution packagers will not work properly on version 9. You will need the version 9 copies of solution packager to work with version 9 solutions. On the upshot, the version 9 of the solution packager is also backward compatible all the way back to 5. Okay? Again, we did some pretty substantial changes in the solution system in this go-round. There are a whole bunch of new objects and entity types that are available in the system now as well. Virtual entities. Let's talk about virtual entities. So what are virtual entities? A virtual entity is the mechanic by which we would embed data into the application. Now, there are a couple of different ways that we do that. Those of you that, a couple of you I can see in the room were with us in, I think it was the Netherlands, where I demoed the ability to go out and talk to a third-party service and bring that data into the view space of CRM. And I did that with a logic app. But I used the mechanic that we've been using from a virtual entity point of view for a long time, which means I had some sort of anchor record data in the system, and then I went out and I started synchronizing. And I was using CRM as kind of a transient, unauthoritative storage. That's the way we've been doing it. Now, we can either do it through the client side or we can do it through the server side. It's clunky, and it suffers from some significant problems. That being that A, you've got to sync the data. That means that there's more than one place that data lives, potentially. And B, you've got to sync the data, which means it consumes storage. And unless you're really, really careful, people can edit it locally, which creates, again, another problem because now you have data that is out of sync. Okay? So in 9, we're adding a new feature set called virtual entity. Virtual entity is going to allow us to pull data from various data sources. In this case, OData4, which is what we're shipping out of the box. We have the ability to talk to an OData4 endpoint and wire that into a model that you've defined within the CRM XRM platform. And I've got 3 names for everything. I apologize, guys. So today, we've got the ability to do things like suck data in from OData4 out of the box. We're going to be providing you a document DB provider as well. Now, that's going to be something that shows up on AppSource. It's something built by the same team, but it will work with DocDB. We've got a lot of other things that we'd like to do. We'd like to pull in a SQL-based data source as well, and we'd like to be able to pull in a data source from Azure Data Lake into the environment. Now, let me be clear. We're not talking about syncing that data into CRM. The data lives out in those endpoints and is referred to and brought into the experience on demand based on the retrieve operation that you're executing. Okay? So we're not actually storing the data in it. Now let's talk about what it means from a customizer point of view and from a developer point of view. When you go through and define a virtual entity, you define a virtual entity the same way you define any other entity in the CRM world or in the XRM world. First, and I know that's like impossible to see, but you tag that entity as a data source within the entity. This has some special ramifications to the system. That entity doesn't physically exist inside the XRM infrastructure. What does it mean? It means that there isn't an account base. There isn't a virtual entity base table. It doesn't physically exist. The model exists in our metadata definition, which means everything works. You can query it. It shows up in the API. You can interact with it. If you're a Power Apps developer and you want to access it, you can access it through the Dynamics connector. All of that's there. Okay? It just doesn't physically exist in the system. It also means that you're not owning that data. Okay? The next aspect that you go through and do is you go through and you create what is called a data source. Well, this is an example of it showing up. There's a thing called a data source. The data source is the configuration of that data sink. So in the case of OData4 is a generic data source or a data provider. Now you need some way to configure it to talk to your OData interface. That's what a data source is. A data source is also an entity that is defined in our system, and it is something that is open to you to configure with whatever parameters that you need to configure and connect to whatever it is you want to connect. And I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. Okay, so from there, in the case of manifesting, you can see that in this case you've got a link to something called widget, which is a rotor. That widget, that reference in the case of the account, doesn't physically exist in the system. We're able to embed those components in any other form. It's a lookup table. What we do support today is virtual entities. So an entity in its entirety can be modeled as a virtual object. We do not yet support the ability to model attributes on another entity as virtualized. Okay? That is something we are seriously looking at, and hopefully will be something we take up in the near future. All right. So let's talk about the two pieces that make this up. You have the concept of a data provider. Now, the data provider is modeled just like we'd model any other type of plugin within the system, except that it runs in a special context. Somebody, right off the top of your head, how many different states do we allow you guys to extend right now? Anybody? 3? They are pre-operation, post-operation. Right, correct. There are actually 8 different plugin states in the system. One of them is a thing called main operation. Main operation is how we run our code. Okay? Runs in a transaction, in a box, and it's how we actually execute. It's the fastest, closest to the disk point, if you will, in the system. Virtual entities run in main operation. You cannot actually register that directly. You have to register it through the data provider system, and then we manage that. We manage that for you. The mechanic that we go through that, I'll actually demonstrate it to you real quick, just in a rush. And then, of course, the data source itself is how you configure the data entity to have, if you will, the configuration that you need. So in my case, if I'm talking out to a Daybreak gaming service, I need an access code. If you're talking out to an AAD service, you maybe need an application ID. If you're talking to a Siebel deployment, maybe you need an application ID, a URI, and a worker ID. Okay? If you're talking to a Genesis contact system, same deal. Yes, sir?
So regarding that reference to metadata on another source, how does the system handle changes to that metadata?
Great question. So the model that you create within CRM, customer engagement, the model that you create within the customer engagement environment is the static model for the system. The data provider is responsible for mapping from the target to the source. Okay? In the case of the OData data providers, and we will at some point make these patterns available to you guys, we do have a dynamic remapping capability that we use to manage this. So inside the entity, when you model the entity, you tag the various components that say this refers to this component of the communication stream. This refers to that component of the communication stream, and so on and so forth. We call that the external name. From within your plugin, you have a reference to the entity model and all of the external names, and therefore you can play that in. Now, in the implementation we're going to give you in version 1, you have to do that implementation mapping yourself. You have to write the code to do that. We're going to give you helpers to do it, but you have to write the code to do it. In the near future, as we bring some other feature sets online around being able to run plugins in full trust for you, that will open up the capabilities to be able to use things like reflective remapping or auto mapping feature sets that are restricted inside the partial trust space. Make sense? We do have examples of how to do it. We actually use that specifically in the DocDB connector and in the OData connector. And we actually built those. We built them as examples. But we're not going to ship them in version 1 because you can't do anything with them yet. Okay? It'd be kind of like teasing candy in front of you. Look what you could do, you know. But as soon as we get to that next gate, which is allowing you to run your plugins in a higher trust boundary, we're going to open that up for you. Make sense? Okay. All right. So building a provider. The system operates using the same mechanic. If you've ever built a virtual entity before, an old way, you process the query expression that comes in. So we start with fetch XML, we turn that into a query expression, you get the query expression inside the system as part of a retrieve or retrieve multiple request. You in turn translate that into whatever the REST request is. It's your job. We don't know what you're talking to. And we actually did sit there and try to think about how could we make that super simple and modify and build replacement parameters and a bunch of other things. And we were like, we're never going to ship this if we don't get it out the door this way. So we've decided to go the way we have it right now. You get to deal with the mapping of what the request is to what your data source URL format is. Now, be that a REST request or some other request topology, service bus or something else, that is the responsibility of you. Now, the response that comes back, we have the name JSON out here. It doesn't have to be JSON. It could be whatever the language that you want to use. XML, clear text if you want. It's up to you. You then, in turn, play that back into an entity collection in the case of a retrieve multiple or an entity in the case of a retrieve back to the UX. Okay? And then it models back into the UX. Now, obviously, we have created a scenario whereby the performance of the user, the perceived performance of the user, could be really, really bad. We have lots of telemetry built around that now to point out the fact that whose code it is that is being slow. So as you build these things, do put a considerable amount of thought into efficiency and into speed of processing. Okay? It is something that is really important. These things are in the UI operation. They're in the SDK operation. They are the things that are delaying the response, potentially. Okay? Now, again, it's worth it in some scenarios. It's absolutely worth it to do it. There's some creative ways you can do it in the forms. If you're using the form system, you want to build a control that in turn does a lazy load through an SDK operation, absolutely viable. But if it's actually part of the form that's being rendered, the primary form that's being rendered, it will delay the render experience. Make sense? Okay, moving on. Next major feature I wanted to talk about.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Is it possible to use normal relationships and lookups to the virtual entity?
Yes.
So then the actual data is stored for just that lookup field?
The reference. The reference, you have to return a GUID. You have to create a GUID model that we understand, and we will essentially hand you a lookup reference, which will be a GUID plus the logical name of the entity. And you have to map that to whatever your key indexes are.
So the actual visual name, the primary field of the virtual entity, the name, for example, of an external account or whatever.
Yep.
Is that stored in the CRM?
It is. It's part of the model. So when you model a virtual entity, it will reflect that. You essentially have the control of what that looks like. Okay? And again, we don't physically model it into the system. We store it as an attribute of the entity. Make sense? Another question? They are not in SQL. So if you've done the thing we ask you not to do and directly connect to SQL, you won't see virtual entities in SQL. I'm sorry? They will not be through the filtered views either. Yep. Yep. They don't physically exist in our system. Okay? Yes, sir.
Lookups between two virtual entities. Is that just handled by us?
That's handled by you. But the system will juggle that, meaning you can have entity that has a lookup to something else. I believe that is supported, yeah. That shows up as a linked query, so you have to parse that. But yes. Okay, there was a question over here.
Do you know how long that's been asked for?
Which one? Multi-select option sets? Yes.
Like option set?
Yeah, so let's move on. I've got time for questions at the end. So yes, multi-select option sets. So yes. I think it was CRM 4.
Yeah.
CRM 4. All right. So multi-select option sets. What does it actually mean? So why didn't we do it? Why did it take us so long to do it? There's a lot of water under that bridge, but fundamentally, it had more to do with the way the query language worked and the way the objects were modeled in our platform. This is one of the byproducts of the separation that we've done. Those things that used to be super secret, how do we make that work, under the covers, now have to become solution enabled and solution aware. Okay? That's the fringe benefit of that separation, that breakdown of the system. The breaking out of each module. Modules now have to play by the solutioning system rules, which means the solution system had to get a lot smarter, which means things like multi-select option sets become a real thing. Okay? They're not something that we have behind the covers. Don't pay attention to what's going on here. So, what are they? First off, they're set up inside the UI. They are actually modeled inside the UI, and they are set up to be configured from the UI. We've implemented full UX support for this. So, at the end of the day, it is a new kind of attribute. Okay? We've added a new attribute. We've actually added a couple of them, and I'll talk about a couple of them. It is supported in the web client, the unified interface. It's also supported in the SDK. Okay? Full first-class citizen. We actually made it available in Advanced Find in the UI. How about that? In Advanced Find. Okay? Speaking of which, on that subject, the not in fetch component is now also in the Advanced Find UI. That was something we stuck in there along the way. Not in has been in the system for a while, but we actually got the UX team to put it in. All right, so how do you define it? When you define a new multi-select attribute, you go through, you create a multi-select option set attribute. Down here at the bottom, that shows up there on a form, drops in just like that. You can register it in a view, just like you can everything else. And when it appears, you can work it with a full query system as far as dealing with the ability to decide whether something is in or not. From a use point of view, it shows up as a comma or colon delimited list. So in this case, America, Asia, and Europe are three options in the option set, in this case, that are region. Okay? So when I actually need to invoke that, so I go into the region, I hit the region dropdown, and I now get a multi-select option set UX that my user can consume. Okay? Obviously, there's a lot of really nifty, cool ramifications that go with this, some new cutting and slicing and filtering feature sets. We're looking forward to seeing what you do with it. Now, moving on, if we scroll down and look at how it looks in a filter, you are now able to filter on that feature set within your UX as well. Okay? So this now gives you the ability to say, I want to slice my 12,000 accounts, my 50,000 accounts, my 60,000 accounts inside CRM by these parameters. Now, that does not mean that we're, if you get into the very, very large counts, of course, we're going to tell you to go use Power BI, which is something else that we've made extremely easy to use now in the V9 platform. And I believe we have a couple of sessions on that. But this gives you the in-app ability to do it. You can also query this way. So through the client SDK, you can query in. All right, something else.
Data import, export.
Data import, export, yes.
For the option sets.
Yes, they have to be defined. Okay? Yes, you can do it. Auto number, we have actually brought it in. Something for you. Okay? Now, yeah, you don't have to build your own anymore. I'm sorry to the ISVs that built the auto number feature set. I do apologize, but we did bring it in because the number of tickets that were being created because of thread problems and lock problems, we really got to expose this. It's one of those duh things. So, new attribute type. A couple of things about it. We did not have time to finish the UI. We actually debated whether we were going to show it to you, but we've decided it's such a kind of an in-demand thing that we're going to go ahead and let you guys have it now, with the caveat that you've got to do it through the SDK. Okay? And we'll get you the UI. The UI is coming. Okay? Through the SDK, we support the ability to define a new attribute type, in this case of string. It's a string type with a format that attaches to it that tells it that it is a auto number format. It's the new property type. It shows up in the 9X SDKs. We're supporting a set of tokens today. There is full documentation on this, by the way, as well. It's in the preview site right now, so those of you that are in the previews who can see the preview docs for MSDN, or for the doc site, you'll actually see the documentation on how to do this. But as I said, we're making it available to you now as part of the 9X product. This will not be backported. This is going to be 9X going forward. Okay? Again, this is a byproduct of the breakdown of the system. Bringing the customer service module, in fact, in this case, it was specifically the customer service module's solutionization that drove this particular feature set coming in. So a lot of that, expect to see a lot more of that in the future, where there are features that were used to be core parts of the platform that we're now making available for third-party solution development. Okay? So moving on. So let's go on and talk about building on. So everything I've talked about so far has been updates to the core platform itself. And again, I've only touched on a subset of those feature sets. We don't have enough time to go through everything, but I do encourage you to read the What's New docs for the 9X platform. It's a good 3 pages of stuff that we've exposed. I just hit the top points. So building on, let's start with global discovery. Global discovery is something that we are making big. We're going out the door with global discovery as part of the 9X release. It works all the way back to 7X, everything that's online. There is a star. What does that mean? Global discovery works for the commercial deployment. It does not work for the sovereign deployments. So global discovery will not let you see what's in the German cloud or what's in the US government cloud. You actually have to go connect to those, have to have permission to get into those to be able to see the instances that are in those clouds. However, the global discovery service will allow you to fully see everything that's in the commercial cloud with one query. Okay? You don't have to go bouncing around anymore. So let's actually look at that. So if my machine didn't go to sleep, good morning. Alrighty. There we go. Let's bounce you over to 8. Really? All right. So what I'm going to use the PowerShell system to do this. Actually, let's start with raw. So I'm going to use a tool called Postman. Who here has used Postman before? A couple of folks. Great tool, made by a competitor, but a really good tool. So what I've done here is I've gone out and refreshed a token. In this case, I'm using a token to talk to the global discovery system. And I'm going to talk to the discovery system and ask it for all instances for this particular token. Now, this particular instance is talking to just North America. It's going across our wonderful network here, and you can see that the initial request was a little high. Let me do a subsequent request. Okay? So 97 milliseconds to get 15 orgs out of the system. Okay? Now, that's neat. That's the raw feature set. We can do that in PowerShell, too. Get CRM organizations. And in this case, I'm going to say online type. I'm going to leave deployment region off. Office 365, credential. And what I'm going to do is that same operation, so that's $cred. And I'm just going to fire that through the PowerShell system. And again, format table. So we can see that there. So that's the instance there. Now let's do something a little bit more interesting. I'm going to change this credential to my corporate credential. You guys will actually see how many instances that Microsoft has. Okay, so it's a bit bigger. And you'll notice things like India showing up. One query to get them all. So let's drop that in to that query, and let's dump that out to a variable so we can actually get a count. Orgs equals that. There we go. Bang, bang. And there we go. So let's do orgs.count. 139 orgs, okay, in one query, that fast. Okay, that's global discovery. That's something that we've added as part of the 9X release. We are investing pretty heavily in global discovery as we move forward. So one of the features, right away, the features that you're going to start seeing appear in the global discovery system are things like, is the guy an admin? What permission level does he have? That will become a property in the global discovery system. So when you discover you're in context of a user, you will know right away if the guy is, or the gal, or whomever, has the appropriate permission to do whatever the operation is you want. Now, the permission set is going to be limited initially to admin, customizer type behaviors, not are they a sales user, okay? It is focused around the idea of determining whether or not they have a high enough permission level to be able to be used by or interact with an external application. There are other things that we're doing at Global Discovery that you will see appear over the next couple of months. Now, and that's something I want to stress. Global Discovery is a cloud service that we ship. So unlike the core engine and the old Discovery server, it is not bound to our API contract that we typically do for the CRM services, okay? It will rev very quickly. We will not remove things from it. We will add. It will be an additive change. And if we do remove, we will rev it. It is set up as version 1 right now. But when you see version 1.1 appear, it'll be something we remove. So speaking of that, let's talk about the Web API. A couple of things with the Web API that has changed. In the case of the Web API, focus on this particular release. Well, there's been a lot of focus on the guts of the Web API to make it faster. But the main focus of this release has been around metadata versioning and providing for the facility and the capability to allow us to rev the Web API again very rapidly, but provide a version cadence that you can attach to. So if you attach to version 9.0 and you have implementations that are dependent upon 9.0 and in 9.1, 9.2, or 10 we remove something, your implementation will continue to function. Okay? Now, there will be a point in time where we say, you've got to move forward. Okay? We will deprecate, and we'll deprecate an endpoint at that point, or a version of the endpoint as we move forward. And you'll see policies around that begin to arrive. Okay? But that's the major focus of the Web API this go-round. A couple other things that have come up. As we build more and more satellite systems, things that are plugging into the Web API, I'm consistently getting questions about, well, how do I know if the user has permission to perform X, Y, or Z operation? Okay, I'm dealing with some arbitrary user that I picked up, or I'm dealing with an S-to-S connection, and I want to know if the user has the permission to be able to do what they want to do. Now, we've had that in the case of the SOAP API for quite a while. Although I've found, just in passing, I've found that folks don't know we have it. So I wanted to actually bring that up and show that to you. So in this case, so in this particular instance here, I have the scenario where I have an account. So I'm going to do get all accounts. I need to authorize myself for the instance. And let me do get all accounts. So I've gone out, I'm asking for all accounts. Now let's just, for argument's sake, let's say I know what the account is in question. Hello, knock, knock, network. This happened to me when I was actually working on this, and I ended up going to my wireless to get around this problem. So while it's deciding whether it's going to come back, we have a feature in the system that allows us to actually query for a current set of privileges. So that is, it's kind of a, it's an interesting query, if you will, in the fact that what you do is you come in and you ask, from the point of view of a system user, you can retrieve principal access with a target of the target entity, okay? Now, why do I bring this up? One of the other things that we're doing excessively on the back end now, specifically in the online system, is we are monitoring plugin usage. We're monitoring exceptions coming out of the SDK. We're monitoring all artifacts of events and things that are going on that raise red flags in our system that impact performance. Not for us, but for you. And we're reaching out and doing that. We found that there is a pattern that seems to be a bit pervasive where people just shoot at the entity, and if it accepts, they take the compensating pattern. Okay? That's horrible. Don't do that. Realistically, what you want to do is you want to take a shot at the entity using, do they have permissions? Retrieve access permissions. What permissions does this user have for this? Okay, so if you don't know, ask. And that will quickly tell you whether or not they can do things like read to it, write it, update it, that sort of thing. Or you can continue to do what you're doing. It'll bounce off, it'll throw an exception, you can take the compensating behavior, and if you do it enough, you'll get a phone call from one of us and ask you, what is going on? Okay, so moving on. Let's talk about .NET updates. Updates to the .NET SDK. So the .NET SDK has gotten a pretty heavy touch as part of this release. Now, you've heard us say a couple of times that we will support the shift to the Web API through the .NET SDK if you're using it, because our own applications are using it relatively extensively. That first pass has occurred. Okay? So in the new .NET SDK, we've added certificate support. We're actually giving the ability to outsource authentication, which means that you can build your own authentication provider if you have some other mechanic that you want to use. You don't like the way we do it, as long as we comply with it. We allow you to skip discovery, which means if you happen to know the URL precisely, you can connect to it. Now, I'm going to look around the room and go, I know half the people in the room and go, yes, I don't have to go through discovery anymore. I'm going to point out that we use global discovery in the .NET SDK right now, so it's really, really fast. And the odds of you getting it right, 60–65% of the time we see that succeed if they're skipping the discovery process, because we do move things around. Okay, the discovery system handles that for you. We also added clone connection support. So from an established connection, if you want another channel, so you're going to spin off a ton of threads, we don't want you to have to go spin up a new connection anymore. We don't want you to have to pay that tax again. We're going to let you clone it. So it'll have everything that you've got. It'll have gone all through the initialization. Everything will be loaded there. OAuth login performance OAuth login perf has been improved pretty substantially, once again. And we, again, are using the global discovery service within it. Internally, we're actually using the Web API now for probably 10 to 15% of the operations that go through the CRM service client. My goal is that you'll never know. Okay? If I do it right, you won't know I'm doing it. And that's the direction. One of the things that we'd like to be able to do relatively quickly, I don't know if we're going to make it into the 3.0 release of this tool, is give you a hook to be able to call the Web API directly. So we'll handle authentication, we'll handle the recycling of all that. Essentially, the only reason you'd use us to do that in that scenario is if we're handling auth and you want diagnostic support. But we'll give you a direct call through to plumb a request through and let you put in some headers and whatnot. That's something that we're looking at exposing before we close the door up on the 3.0 release and ship it. Next up, actually, let me state one other thing here. As part of the 9X release, we've said this on the MVP boards, so those of you that are on the MVP boards have seen this comment. I'm going to say it to this room. You'll see the public documentation coming out on this relatively soon. We are moving to TLS 1.2 only for the 9X release. Now, what does that mean? It means that we ship our SDK on .NET 4.5.2. So if you build on 4.5.2 and your apps are deployed on 4.5.2, they're running as 4.5.2, they will no longer be able to connect to CRM 9. They won't be able to get through primary authentication. If you have built your application on 4.6 using our 4.5.2 SDK, you're fine. It's going to work. What's happened is Microsoft Corp and the industry at large has decided that the TLS, the transport layer security specifications for version 1 and version 1.1 are insufficient to provide significant or safe enough security for these kinds of communications. And now they're advocating that everybody move to 1.2. This is something that we're adopting, and we're adopting it with our new version of the product. .NET 4.5.2, out of the box, does not initialize a connection on TLS 1.2. It actually initializes it on TLS 1.1. You can persuade it to use TLS 1.2 in a couple of different ways, and we'll document and ship those. But the simplest and easiest way to do it is to recompile for 4.6 or 4.6.2, which default to TLS 1.2 as the initial handshake. Okay? So very, very important safety tip. This will impact 9X only on initial launch. Does anybody in here have applications that run in the government cloud? No? One person? Okay. So it will impact the government cloud as well, in the fact that we will enable it there. The time frame for that's a little bit later, but initially it's going to be the 9X platform. Okay? So the ISVs in the room, spread the word. All right, PowerShell. We've done a bunch of stuff with PowerShell as we've moved forward. So a couple of things that we've done. PowerShell has been refactored to be modules. We'll be providing all PowerShell components as modules, and we'll start shipping them on the PowerShell gallery in addition to NuGet. So that will be something that you'll be able to essentially write install package or install module if you're on Windows 10 in PowerShell, or if you're using an Azure deployed service using the Azure PowerShell installer, and it will go off and get the right module that you need, the current version of it, to do the operation in question. So for example, if you want to get the most current connector or the most current package deployer, you simply call install module Microsoft.xrm.tooling package deployment, and you get the most current version of package deployment. Okay? And that comes down off the web. Of course, that does require a web-based feature set. We do also fully support certificate-based authentication in connection strings as part of PowerShell. So you can now use certificate-based authentication there. We do not yet support client secret-based keys. It's something that we are discussing, but the reason we're kind of ambivalent on it, quite frankly, is that the other way to describe a client secret is a username password, which is the fundamental problem of why we went to certificates in the first place. Certificates do have a bit more overhead, of course. So a bunch of updates in the PowerShell space there. One other aspect about the PowerShell and the SDK in general, the 9X release will not, at this point, ship an SDK drop the way we have done it in the past. We will not have one big package with all the SDK bits in it. All of the components of the SDK will be shipped in three places. They'll be shipped in NuGet, so all the applications, all the SDKs, all the support libraries will all be NuGet packages. They'll be shipped in PowerShell Gallery, that's where all the PowerShell components are going to be, and the samples will be up on GitHub. Okay, so we're moving to that model of delivery because it's a whole lot easier for us to maintain that. We don't have to form up a whole release, get everybody together, nod their head, and ship it. We can patch the components that we need. Okay, moving on. Administration updates. Two important things in the administration space that I want to touch on. First and foremost is the admin API. Who here has wanted to be able to write a PowerShell script that actually lets you go provision an instance in CRM Online? Okay, we now are giving you the ability to provision instances in CRM Online, to delete instances in CRM Online, to manage instances, to admin mode CRM instances, all of that through the PowerShell system. The version that has been shipped out initially is what we're referring to as our 1X release. The 1X release is focused on just the core instance operations. The design goal for the admin API will to provide the facility to fully replace all features of the admin center as with API equivalents. Okay, which means if you can do it in the admin center, you'll be able to do it through the API. Now, it's also important to note that if you can't do something in the admin center, the API isn't going to let you do it either. Okay? Important to note. It just won't be as explicit about it. One of the nice things about the admin center is that it is a web UI. You have a lot of UX that you can throw at, no, you can't do this. I'm going to guide you down this path. Yes, the admin API will let you try to create a trial instance directly, which you're not allowed to do, okay? And it will yell at you. So let's take a look at that real quick. Oh, it is Swagger enabled, so you can actually see what the interface looks like whenever you'd like. So we'll flip over to this. There we go. And I'm going to change my context over here to the admin API. And I'm going to start here with just the raw REST request system. It is a REST API, so I can go through in this case and hit up the admin API and ask it for things like get me all instances. And when I ask it for getting me all instances, it's going out to the admin and under my context and pulling up data on the instance. Now you'd say, well, that sounds like a discovery call. Well, it sort of is, but there's a lot more data that comes back with this call. There are things like what's the admin mode state of it, what type of instance it is, what the domain it's configured to act as, who is the owner of the instance. All of those things come back as part of the call to get CRM instances to the admin API. To be able to call this, you have to be either a tenant admin, a global admin, same privileges set that you have in the admin center. Okay? Joe Smith can't call it. Now, that said, we have added a feature set to the admin API that allows you to register a management application to act on your behalf, which means if you wanted to build a portal that managed the CRM deployment for you using your own UI and acting as a person without actually having that person sitting at the console, as long as the person authorizes the app in and then registers the app, it will be able to access as an application, S2S authentication to the admin center. Okay. Whoop. Now, let's look at this through PowerShell. I actually prefer to look at it through PowerShell because it's a bit easier for me to see this way. So if I did, for example, get CRM instance types. So we're going to ask it for the instance types that I have inside the environment. Instance types. So I'm going to do the API URL because I'm connecting to a CRM. This is a real system. And I'm going to talk to my cred, credential, $cred, and I'm going to format this as a table. Actually, no, I'm just going to let it go. Boom. Okay, so it's going to go out, talk to the admin API, and it's going to come back and say, this is what your inventory of things that you can do are. In this case, I have a total of 6 production instances, 3 of which are consumed. I have a total of 16 sandboxes, of which 11 are consumed. And the various other components. I have trial, preview, support. These are the different instance types that I've had along the way. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go provision a new instance. So first thing I need to do is I need to go get the service versions. So service versions is the versions of the XRM platform that we currently have within a geo. So within North America, we have those versions, 4 different versions that are actually active for provisioning use if you were to want to reset a sandbox or go into a sandbox mode. Okay? It gives you the version number, the language code, the base language codes for them, and so on and so forth. You can also get the templates that are available for use in that region, and it will in turn also tell you what versions, supported service versions, those templates are set up to talk to. So in the case of the sales template, that's the supported version. What does it mean? It means that when you go to provision a new instance, you can provision an instance and say, I want sales on it. And it will stamp the sales image. Okay? Pretty nifty. Now, let's go provision an instance. I've got just a minute or 2 left, so let's go and I'm going to create an instance type that I'm going to request here. I'm going to create an instance called Microsoft Ignite 01. This is the set of data that I need to populate. I'm creating it as a sandbox. And then I'm going to send a request to the system asking it to verify, validate that this is an okay thing to do. So that's going to in turn ship that request up to the admin API. The admin API is talking to the admin center. And it's going to come back and say, yep, this is an okay thing. No errors allowed. Now, if I change that, and let's say I actually came up here and said I want to create a trial. Let me write that again and run that request. And run the validate on it there. I'm going to get a bunch of errors back. It's going to come back, I've got an error. As you can see, I've got some errors here. If I actually go look at that collection instance, validate result error, boom, it says not available. Okay? So you have the ability to see what's going on. Now let's actually go create it. So once again, I'm going to reset my, my request. And since I knew it worked last time, I'm just going to call create new instance. Bam. So how long does it take to create a CRM instance?
14 seconds.
14 seconds. Okay? We'll see. So he's creating a CRM instance right now.
Can it create preview instances too?
Done. CRM instance is up and ready. That's accessible. That instance is now accessible. Yeah, you were off a bit.
Can it create preview instances?
Not today. Yeah, preview instances are restricted. So any type that you can create through the admin center, it can create. Preview instances have to be created from our backend right now. It's something that we've been discussing. Okay, so this is the admin API. It also has an operational query. It can do backup and restore. That's actually its most useful use case in this case, in that you can do backups and you can restores. You can blow this instance away. I can turn right around and call delete and delete this instance. It'll let us do that. Now, the important thing to understand is that there is this thing called an operation status. So if this was not readily available, we didn't immediately able to provision that, we'd come back and give you an operation ID that said, hey, I've queued this. We're going to start working on this. At which point you would call the get CRM operation status and listen to that to see it get through to finish the deployment. Okay, one last thing. I'm over time here just a bit, but very, very important. Again, I was forced to consolidate down of all the cool things. Security management, session timeout settings. This is something we have added to the platform as part of the 9X release. This now allows you to control how long the token lasts for the particular CRM instance. So you can configure it that says my customer's token lasts 24 hours or it lasts 10 minutes. Okay, you have the capability to support that now. And with that, I'll wrap it all up. I will ask you to please put evaluations in. If you want me back next year, please do put in, yes, please come back. If you don't want me, get out, that's fine. Just need to know one way or the other. So with that, I think I'm going to have to move, but we can take one. Can I take one question or two questions, or I'm out of time? One question. I'm allowed one question. Yes, sir.
Do they apply only during managed solution or also when you're updating your data or supporting unmanaged?
They apply under managed solution conditions and unmanaged. Okay. Yep. Oh, so I want to, this is the bonus item for those of you guys that said, developer toolkit. You'll notice that we have now webhooks. Didn't talk about webhooks. That's one of the features I couldn't talk about, didn't have time. Very, very cool. And data sources. So underneath data sources, inside the dev toolkit, we are going to give you the ability, when the connection lets me do it, to do register a new data source or new data provider. I can go through and create my provider name, foo. I can choose a solution to create foo in. I can create a new data source entity straight through here, my entity. And there, create. It's going to go create my data source object, and I can go straight through here to create my templates ready to code for my data provider. So we're going to drop in a set of templates, pre-registered. Yeah, so the network just burped on me. We're going to pop in the ability for you to have a set of pre-built references where you can go through and create new plugins right from within the dev toolkit that will wire right into your data provider. Okay? Plugin registration tool also has this feature set. That's actually where it's coming from, as well as the web registration stuff. Okay? So out of time. Thank you guys. Thanks a lot.